Today we're going to be putting together a Probe Plus. These are the components of the head unit that we'll be dealing with. And we'll be using a set of tools that looks quite a lot like that. That said, let's get started. Our first step in assembly is going to be placing the slide on the body. Your slide will come like this. It actually has 3 sections, and you will remove the middle one and set it aside. Note that the middle section here has 1 drilled hole. When that section is all the way back, it lines up with a hole in the base. This is a reference hole, and we'll use it to position the slide on our body. So positioning wise, there are 4 threaded holes down the center of the body. The second hole from the motor aligns with that reference hole, which goes all the way through both sections. So this hole will go on the second, which leaves the first hole aligned here, the third location from the rear of the slide. That's the position of our slide. For assembly, the slide attaches with 4 bolts. They look exactly like this, and there are 3 different lengths. These are all number 8 32 bolts, not to be confused with the slightly thicker number 10 bolt that we'll use for the motor in a moment. So these bolts will use the 1 inch in the rearmost hole, and then the shortest 2 1/4 inch in the 2 front holes in these locations. That'll be the first step in our assembly. We are going to be using Loctite throughout assembly. Highly recommend. Keeps your screws from coming out, obviously enough. We're just going to put a dab on the threads of each of our slide bolts. A little drop. Don't really want to bathe them. You'll never get them off if you ever need to. So just something like that. If you can see, I can't really tell what that camera is or is not picking up. We'll be applying these screws with a drill driver. In my case, you can of course also apply them by hand. If going by hand, I would suggest tight, but not gorilla tight. Don't risk stripping out the screw heads if you're doing it by hand. Hopefully if you're using a drill driver, you have a clutch. On this one, it's going to be set for about, I'm going to use 16, which means I have to work a little bit to hold it back. First bolt will be the 1 inch, number 8 32, in the rearmost hole in the body. And I'm going to go ahead and put that one tight. The next one, we'll use a 1/4 inch in either of the front holes. Not going to tighten that one down until I have both of these in place. You move the center of the slide to gain access to these holes. And now I've tightened down 1, 2, 3. I'm going to move the slide back. I did miss something. You'll want to take this piece off. There's a little rubber doohickey at the back here. Looks like that. And we don't need it, so we'll set that aside. Chuck it. We'll put this in a location so we can screw this through here. This rubber bumper that I've placed on this screw and should have shown you looks like that. Simple rubber washer. It serves as a bumper in this application. The center portion of the slide has this ball bearing carriage, and if you don't use a bumper like this one, you'll get a strong clicking sound as it comes back and stops against the metal tabs that stop it in normal use. We want this rubber bumper to be compressed fairly substantially. I'm going to say 3 turns of the screw should be sufficient. This screw head needs to be low enough that it is cleared by the slide center that we'll place on later. If you go to that step and you find that any contact is being made between the slide center and this screw head, just turn that down by another turn or 2. and that'll be fine. So this way, it's nice and quiet when it hits the backstop. Flip this over. We have one number 832 nut that we will stick on the back side of the long screw. I'm going to tighten that down with a 9mm nut driver. I'm sure there's a metric equivalent or a standard equivalent. You could also use something like an adjustable wrench. Tighten that down. We just want it to be tight. We've now assembled the slide to the body. Next up, the motor. This is the Bodine motor for the Probe Plus. It is a 1/12 horsepower Bodine DC motor. We'll place it here and drive these 4 screws to secure it. Let's have a look at the screws. They look like this, very similar to the last screws, except these are number 10, slightly bigger. They are 1/2 inch long. There are 4 of them, and once again, we're going to place a little bit of Loctite on those screws. Again, just a dab. We'll be using our drill driver, but we're going to go ahead and crank it up to 21, its maximum setting. These screws can be very tight. You can put as much torque on these as you'd like if you're doing it by hand. I am going to run them all into the holes before I tighten any of them down. And once again, 4 motor screws. With this 4th one, we'll go ahead and tighten it down. You'll note that I'm sitting on that, letting it click for 1/2 a second to a second to get it as tight as it's going to be at that clutch setting. That's the motor assembly. Next, we'll turn this over. We are going to place the wires. They mount to this long screw. This is a secure way to hold these wires. Each of the 3, unless I've changed wire, you'll find it's very hard to see black on black. There is a wrap of electrical tape at a particular location. Those are carefully calculated to leave you the right amount of wire for later assembly processes. So we're going to be securing these with pretty standard wire clips, 1 per wire. They go in a special order. Each time you'll want to place the wire clip right where the tape is. The tape helps it grab because the diameter wire is insufficient for this clip to grab securely. So first off is the hand control. The way I am looking at the machine, which is the opposite of the way you're looking at the machine, I'm looking from the motor end, and the control cord goes from my left to my right. It's going to be on the right side of the screw here. See if I can zoom that in a little bit. Maybe yes, maybe no. Not a video expert here. I am going to apply this so the droop is down, like so. Slide this over that screw. Move on to the power cord. The power cord comes from my right to my left. Again, we're going to have the droop down and on the tape, so it looks like this. Down over the screw. And finally, the motor wire. Tape should be right at the edge of the cut portion, and we will once again go over the tape. This time we're going to put the droop up like so and come from left to right, same side as the power cord, or no, the control cord, pardon me. We have one number 8 nut that goes on to this screw. My nut driver once again. I'm going to put this down a little bit just till it starts to snug up on those wire clips. Then I'm going to push them around a little bit, basically so all of the wires are heading due forward. This will make it easier to put the control on. With that done, I want to get on this nut and drive it down snug. Not quite tight, but snug. In this circumstance, the wires are all securely affixed. We'll zoom back out a little bit. This is your speed control. American made, Dart controls. Nice piece of equipment. First thing I'm going to do is preset these. Looking at it from the end, as shown in the video, pardon me, the leftmost knob is min. We'll set this at 10 o'clock on the dial, so it is aimed that way from my perspective. In the middle is the IR comp. We're going to set that at 9 o'clock on the dial and leave it there. Third is max. 11 o'clock is a good initial setting for this. In a moment we will be adjusting both the min and the max knobs to tune the motor in. The first connection we're going to make will be the control cord. This has 3 short stripped wires that have been tinned, and they go into the terminal strip on the side of the control. You'll note little labels here next to that terminal strip from the mounting plate and heat sink: low, wiper, high. In terms of wire colors, the control connections here will be white to low, green to wiper, and black to high. So we'll make that happen. You want to make sure these are firmly into the control. And we'll secure those with a small flathead screwdriver. White is low, green, wiper, black is high. Once you've screwed those in, do 2 things. Take each cord and give it a good yank to make sure it's secure. And second, take a very close look to make sure there aren't any stray strands of wire that could possibly cross any one of these terminals. Zoom back out. Give it a little more. So with that connected, you'll note how it likes to lay right now. We're going to flip it upside down. Very important that you make this flip. You'll note some labeling here. Arm plus, arm minus will be on my left, this end. Arm plus and arm minus are the armature wires. That is where the motor connects. Leave the red caps in place and do not use those terminals. Over here are ACN and ACL. Those are the incoming AC lines. N will be white and L will be black. So on this Bodine motor, we want armature plus to be the black wire from the Bodine motor. That is the very end. We'll find our motor wires and fully insert black to armature plus, white to armature minus, power cord wires, white to ACN, and black to ACL. Note that our control wants to sit upside down, which is good. We have these 2 green wires. These are ground. One comes from the incoming AC line and one comes from the motor. Twist those together securely and apply 1 wire nut. Just screw that on there clockwise until it's snug and has sucked all the wire up inside it, so no bare wire. The control is attached. Next up, we will put on the control enclosure. So our control's in place, we need to put the enclosure on it. This is the power line enclosure, which we'll be attaching with this little hardware setup, consisting of a 1-inch 3/8/16 bolt, a spacer 1/2 inch long, and a 3/8/16 nut. First thing, dig up the Loctite, put a little drop right down there at the end, because that's where the nut will be. So we take this bolt, stick it through the hole in the enclosure, slide on the spacer, and nestle this in behind the control. Control should pretty much fall in there. Of course, the wires attaching the control to the body keep it tight. We're going to work this nut in, snug it up, and a couple of wrenches. In this case, I'm using a standard crescent wrench and a 14mm box end wrench. Doesn't really matter what you use, as long as you tighten this control up. Now, if we look in there, we want the control to sit flat in the box. And that means that this line, the heatsink, should be pretty parallel to the bottom of the enclosure here. So if we look at this, it looks pretty good. We can give it one final snug. We do want that to be fairly tight, but we are using plastic, so don't go gorilla on it. That's the attachment of the enclosure, and we're ready to tune the motor. We'll connect AC power, turn the control on, and then turn it all the way up. Hopefully you can hear this, at least at the top end. I've got the camera all the way down by the machine. So the first thing you want to do is turn it up until it gets no higher pitched, and then slowly turn it down until it just starts dropping in pitch. I am manipulating the rightmost of the three knobs, the max setting. Once it drops off, turn it back up to exact until it just achieves the highest pitch. Then when you turn it down with the hand knob, it should start falling off pitch immediately. Next, turn to 0 with the switch on and adjust the min knob until the motor just stops. It may help, and in fact it would help me here, if you stick your ear right against the very end of this machine. If you just rest your ear here, you can very easily pick up exactly when that motor starts. So the objective is, from 0 with the switch on, very quickly after you turn it up, it starts, which this one is doing. Turn it up to 10. Very soon after you start turning it down, the pitch starts dropping. That is, the sound of the motor starts slowing. So this one's tuned, and we're good to go. It's a very close space in there, and there are some wires running around, so you may bump one of those knobs as you close this box, and any one of those knobs moving will obviously screw up your tune. So after you get the box secure, double check the tune. I'm just going to leave it connected. Actually, no, I'm not. I would recommend you unplug it for the process of closing the box. We're going to put the box on with some 3/4 inch long number 6 screws. Again, we'll be using our Hitachi drill driver, but I'm going to set this down to 5 on the knob, which is, I can easily hold that back with just my thumb and forefinger. So very lightly on these screws. They are going into plastic and they will strip. So take it easy on them. You want to hold this box against the back so that you can see through there the screw hole you're going into. I'm afraid it's not going to be possible with this camera setup. Drive one down, and what I'll do is put one in the opposite corner. This is a good time to check and ensure that your settings haven't moved. So we'll plug it back in, turn the box on, we'll go to 0, turn it on, it just starts up, and it slows down as soon as I turn it on. So we're good to go there. We'll unplug that again. 2 more screws, and the control box will be fully mounted. That step's complete. This is the offset pin arm. You will find that it ships to you with a hex drive set screw in place. And we're going to take that out because we want to put our good friend Loctite on there. Just a little dab of Loctite. With a little dab of Loctite on there, put that into here. This goes onto the motor shaft. You might need to wiggle it a little bit. Push. You want the shaft of the motor to be flush at the same level with the top of the offset arm. And you want to put this set screw into the keyway. Let's see if I can get a picture of that. The set screw goes right into the keyway, and this will do a great job of locking the rotation of these 2 parts together. So we want to tighten this down pretty tight. Your hex driver is not the strongest thing in the world, I'm sure, so you can't get real strong on that, but get it as snug as you comfortably can. Rotate this if necessary so that the longest stroke setting is at the bottom. That is the farthest distance from motor shaft to one of the adjustment holes. At this point we'll return to our slide center and see if I can about a little bit. The slide center goes on the machine. Your first arm has come to you in 3 parts, a threaded rod center and 2 heim joints, each with different hardware. We'll go ahead and screw these together by inserting the threaded rod into each of the heim joints until it bottoms out. We'll be tightening these in a moment. One end has a thumb screw. That end goes into the offset arm. The other end has a bolt. That goes into the center portion of the slide. I'm going to be using a simple ratchet driver. Any wrench will do. So we'll put this end with the bolt into the slide very firmly. And the thumb screw end can go into the longest stroke setting. You are now done.